Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is. I hope that you're having a good time. This is Andrew Komasinski, and this is the 9th in a series of flips, which are lectures for a critical thinking class at Hokkaido University of Education, Asakawa. This is the 8th one that I'll be assigning as homework. And in this one, we are going to move from the earlier considerations of deductive arguments and look at one type of inductive argument that hasn't gotten very much treatment, and I think this is an important type, especially for non-native speakers to learn about using. First off, let's review. So what we want to look at initially is what we've seen so far. So looking at general arguments, we have seen the concept that we are supposed to be nice when both making and evaluating arguments. When evaluating arguments, this means trying to identify the premises and the conclusion and giving the argument the best structure that we can think of. So making little minor repairs, fixing English mistakes, changing premises slightly if that gives it a stronger form, putting them in the right order. When we're making arguments, the way that we be nice is that we use our terms clearly and we have consistent, concise, and concrete things that we're saying. We place our argument in the right order and we avoid using emotion rather than reason to convince people. So, within this context, the definition of an argument is really important. An argument is a series of statements designed to convince your audience of the truth of your conclusion. A statement, of course, by this point in the semester, I hope you know, is something that is either true or false. A conclusion is the statement you are trying to prove, and a premise is a statement that you are using to support the conclusion which you're trying to prove. So, looking at deductive arguments, some of the key concepts were validity and invalidity, truth-preserving, and we also looked at standard forms. So validity means that it follows all of the rules for a deductive argument. This means it uses a small number of operators and that for every statement it has a well-formed formula, and from this we are able to have the condition where if all of the premises were true, we can guarantee that the conclusion is true, and we call this being truth-preserving. So I showed you 5 standard forms. I showed you modus ponens, if P then Q, P, therefore Q. Modus tollens, if P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. Disjunctive syllogism, so this is A or B, not A, therefore B. Hypothetical syllogism, if P then Q, if Q then R, therefore if P then R. And dilemma, A or B, if A then C, if B then D, therefore C or D. Now we want to look at inductive arguments. Inductive arguments are kind of related in some ways, but in many ways very different from the deductive arguments we've seen. The first difference is that rather than speaking of them as being valid or invalid, we speak of them as strong or weak. Part of the reason for this is they are not truth-preserving. So a strong inductive argument is one that has a conclusion that is probably true based on the argument. A weak inductive argument is one where if the conclusion happens to be true, it's probably not because of your argument. There's 2 common forms we'll look at in this class. One is an argument by analogy, which we'll look at this week, and the other one is a generalization, which we will look at next week. Just to emphasize this, a valid deductive argument is truth-preserving. It cannot have all true premises and a false conclusion. All inductive arguments, on the other hand, can have all true premises but still have a false conclusion. So this is a very different situation than we saw before. So we could have everything we say be true, but it wind up the case that our conclusion is false. So I want to start by explaining what an analogy is. So I know for native speakers of English, we do a lot of this as a very well-practiced form. But for some of my students, this is not something that they're familiar with, at least when I teach it to them the first time. So I want to give some English terms for analogies. So an analogy is a ryuji or a ryuisui. A property is a shise, and fit is tekigo or tekisetsu or tekio. And kind is a shurui, and a relation is kankei, or kanren. We're looking at things in these terms when we're working with analogies. So there's 2 different words for analogy in Japanese. One is ryuji, one is ryuisui. So a ryuji just shows that 2 things are similar, but a ryuisui uses this as an argument to move from one thing to another. So an argument by analogy says that based on the similarities we know between 2 things, they will share another similarity. A generalization, which we'll look at next week, says that we can collect a bunch of data and say something broader based on the data that we have collected. So what is an analogy? Analogy is a comparison between things that have similar features, often used to explain a principle or idea. The adjective analogous just means to say that two things are similar. He swam like a dog. So imagine the way that a dog swims, and then imagine him swimming in the same way. That's what an analogy does. To start off, let's look at what a comparison is. A comparison is something like this. John is older than Riho. Paul is taller than Steve. Ryosuke is richer than Aiko. Grapefruit are bigger than oranges. So these are comparisons. We have two objects and we have a sense in which they're being compared. So we actually have three things here. So we have the item we want to compare. So this is called the primum compendum in Latin. The second item we want to compare, the secundum comparatum. And then we have a common ground, something that we are linking them through. We're looking at these. So if we're looking at John is older than Riho, John is older than Riho is something that compares them based on their ages. Paul is taller than Steve, compares them based on their height. Ryosuke is richer than Aiko. We have Ryosuke and Aiko, and we're comparing how much money they have. Grapefruit and oranges, we're using size. But what if we change that? So if we look at these bottom two, so Riho and Aiko are the same height. So we have another height comparison, but here we're saying the same. Paul and John are just as rich. Here we have another money comparison, but we're making it, instead of different, not one is richer, we're saying both are just as rich. They have the same amount. So an analogy is a type of comparison where we're looking at things that are similar. A grapefruit is like an orange. We mean they are both citrus fruits. We mean there's something about them that is similar. A point guard in basketball is like an attacking midfielder in soccer. We're saying these two roles do something similar. So an analogy often doesn't say what the common ground is. This makes them a little bit harder than other types of comparisons. So there's two things we use analogies for. The first thing we can use an analogy for is to explain something. The second is to argue. When we're explaining, we often use something that is easy to understand to explain something complex and hard to understand. So we pick something people already know, and we use this to explain something people can't easily see or can't easily understand. So if I wanted to explain to a Japanese child why is Beijing so busy, I might say it's like Tokyo. And if I said that, I'm explaining to them that both are the capitals of their countries, both are the largest cities in their countries, both are the economic centers of their countries. This is explanatory because the child doesn't need to really understand what capital or economic center mean in these contexts to grasp that Beijing is important to China like Tokyo is important to Japan. So here are some sample analogies, which I think you'll be able to grasp what I'm referring to. Blue is to sky as brown is to earth. Ice cream is to summer as hot pot is to winter. Track is to run as ocean is to swim. So in this case, ice cream is to summer as hot pot is to winter. So these are the seasons in which we eat these items. Blue is the color we think of for the sky. Brown is the color we think of for the earth. Track is the place where you run, and the ocean could be for you a place where you swim. Yeah, so here I'm just giving them out to you, the color of that thing, the season we eat it in, and how we interact with it. So another analogy I could go with is Seoul is to Korea as London is to England. And then we could follow this with Seoul is the capital of Korea, London is the capital of England, pattern A is the capital of B. So Berlin is to Germany. So we could use this to infer things about the nature of Berlin, and we could try to understand what sort of role it has in German society. Other ones, let's just do a couple more exercises to make sure we understand the basic idea of analogies before we move to how they can explain things and then how they can be used in arguments. Asaikawa Station is to Asaikawa as blank is to Kyoto. I would say Kyoto Station. Tokyo Banana is to Tokyo as a common omiyage is to Sapporo. Tempura is to vegetables what katsu is to meat. So it's something where we are placing it in breading and frying it. So the analogy here is that this is the same sort of modification. It's not perfectly identical, but this is the idea in analogies. So this is the fried, breaded versions of these items. Another one. So sheep are to what Japanese people call Genghis Khan, as bulls are to steak. So we have the animal being transformed into the food. more. Dr. K is to this class period as blank. Some random professor is to your Thursday third period. Soba is to Japanese food what? Spaghetti is to Italian food. Puppies are to dogs. What kittens are to cats. So we have A is in charge of a class at that time, just as B is in charge at this time. And we have A is a noodle dish among the things that people eat in that particular food area. And one is the baby version of the other. So how are analogies explanatory tools? So this is an important question. So analogies can help us to understand things. So let's start with this. I assume people would understand this much. I'm not an expert in soccer, but let's go with it. If you want to get better at soccer, I think you need to run, you need to eat well, you should practice dribbling, and you should practice passing. So if we have this, we could use this knowledge that we have in our heads to think about how to get better at other things. So let's say you wanted to get better at improving English. So we would say that if you want to get better at improving English, you should read, you should learn vocabulary, you should practice pronunciation, you should practice writing. You should do all of the skills that are related to it in the same way that you would for soccer. So this is an explanatory analogy. So maybe you wouldn't know initially how to prepare or how to think of your time, but by thinking through the picture of soccer, you can do better in your own preparation. We could also use this to understand something that you may have no experience with, which is if you want to learn how to learn sign language or what that would feel like, we can look at the things that are involved in learning English. So learning English is something where it involves learning words, learning grammar, practice, frustration, and rewards. So we can assume that if we are learning sign language, that it would also involve learning words, learning grammar, practice, frustration, and rewards. So we could say that it probably involves these similar concepts. Another analogy that I've seen elsewhere is an infection is like a war. In a war, a country is attacked by an enemy. In an infection, your body is attacked by an enemy. These germs invade your nose and they spread into your throat. And once they're inside, they keep on producing and they make you feel sick. So this image of something very small, very hard to see, can be understood through something that we often have an image of fighting and things like that. So here is a picture of this analogy. So we have the structure of how these are both similar. So again, these are using analogies as explanatory tools. So analogies help us to think by giving us a picture or an idea of something that we're familiar with rather than something we're used to seeing as abstract. So if you wanted to tell me what an ocean is, imagine that for some reason I've never seen one, how would you explain it? I think the answer is you could say it's something like a big lake. You could explain it's like a river. You could explain it's like a giant bathtub. So you could explain to me it's a large amount of water, and you could try to use the largest amounts of water that I've ever seen to explain what it is. So you can also extend your analogy to give it more explanatory value. You can explain to me when I say, well, why can't I touch the bottom in the ocean? You could say it's just like a lake. There's so much water, it would be difficult to get to the bottom. If I said, well, why shouldn't I pollute the ocean? You could explain it's like a river that is full of fish, and if you pollute it, they're all going to die. You could also answer, well, why did it take so long to cross the ocean? So you can do many things to extend it. So now I want to shift to talking about how we can use argument by analogy. So before we were looking at how to explain things using an analogy, now I want us to look at how to argue using an analogy. So analogies can be used in explanation or in argument. In an explanation, we are accepting all of the similarities the person is offering. So we are using one idea that we can understand to understand another idea. In an argument, let's say we have 5 things we said about one side. We're going to say 4 things about the other side, and we're going to try and prove that 5th one. So that's how the argument part enters in, is we're saying they have so many things in common, they probably have this last thing in common. So we're trying to say this further similarity follows. So the basic thing is we'll have a conclusion where there's a similarity between the 2 objects that we've already shown for one, and we want to say the second item shares this similarity. So that's going to be the style of our conclusion as I have it over here. For the premises, for item A, we'll have A, B, C, D. For item 2, we'll have A, B, C, and we're trying to say D about item 2. As an example, so let's say we have Saburo. Saburo is a duck. Saburo can swim. So we have June, who's another duck. Our conclusion, June can also swim. So this is the concept here, is that we said, well, they're both ducks. One of them can swim, so probably the other one can swim too. So we're going to restate that. Saburo is a duck. We know Saburo can swim, Jun is a duck, therefore Jun can swim too. The form of the argument is that we're claiming that we know something about ducks based on what we know about Saburo, and then we're saying, well, Jun's a duck too, and we're extending it to Jun. Okay? Here's a similar one. We're going to say Aya is from Hokkaido and speaks Japanese. Tetsuya is from Hokkaido, so Tetsuya can speak Japanese. So here we're making a claim that there is a kind of people, that the kind of people that we're talking about is people from Hokkaido, and that these people who are from Hokkaido share a property. They share the ability to speak Japanese. So then if Tetsuya is a member of this kind, we would say Tetsuya can also speak Japanese. We can look at this in a slightly different way, is we are going from things that have the same property to the same kind. We say that A has properties X, Y, Z, and is a Q. And we say that B has properties X, Y, and Z, and therefore is also a Q. So we can go from property to kind as well. So Tora speaks Japanese. He lives in Tokyo. He likes tigers and baseball. Tora is a boy. Yuki speaks Japanese, lives in Tokyo, likes tigers and baseball. So Yuki is probably a boy. So this is the structure of this type. Another example, Midori is Japanese. Midori likes soba, somen, ramen, natto, and udon. Natsumi likes soba, somen, ramen, natto, and udon. So Natsumi is probably Japanese. So this is the style that we have here. Let's do a problem together. Squirrels are mice-like animals. They're covered in fur, they're friendly, they're cute. Stephanie likes squirrels. Hamsters are mice-like animals. They're covered in fur, they are friendly, they are cute. Ergo, Stephanie probably likes them too. Okay, let's go to another problem. Miyazaki is a boy. Miyazaki is loud, annoying, and likes sports. Taniguchi is a boy, therefore. We might say that Taniguchi is loud or annoying or likes sports or all three. If we say all three, as I will explain later, that's going to be much, much weaker because we are saying too much. So a rectangle has 4 sides and 4 right angles. It's a quadrilateral. A square has 4 sides of equal length and 4 right angles. Therefore, it's also a quadrilateral. Properties, we have 3 properties, and we're going from 3 properties to something that we know 2 about and saying that it's the same kind because it has these similarities. Another problem. Disneyland is expensive. Disneyland is an amusement park for a famous brand. It is located in Japan. Universal Studios is an amusement park for a famous brand. It is located in Japan. So we have these similar properties. From this, we could say that it's probably expensive too. So just to review in general, arguments by analogy are not truth-preserving. This means even if all of our premises are true, it is possible that our conclusion is not true. They're also not valid. There is no pattern of an argument by analogy that guarantees the truth of the argument by analogy that we are making. But they're very useful. We use these all the time to make sense of our world. In order for an argument by analogy to work, it depends on having relevantly similar examples. So they're strong or weak depending on the fit between the 2 items. So how do we look at this fit? So we're looking at whether or not they match up. So again, a deductive argument can be valid or invalid. When they're valid, they're truth-preserving. And this means that they are fully convincing if their premises are true. Inductive arguments can't be valid or invalid. They're not truth-preserving. And that means they're strong or weak, depending on how convincing their premises are, plus the style of their justification. To make a good argument by analogy, we need enough similarity to make it work. So sometimes people talk about this as fit. So fit means how well 2 things match. But let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So fit is a concept from clothing. So clothing fits if it's the right size. It's not baggy. It's not so tight that you're constricted. An argument by analogy works when 2 things are the same size for the parts that matter for the argument. So I'm going to suggest 4 things to look at. 1, the number of similarities. The more you have and the more kinds of things you have, the better. So the second one, the variety of similarities. What sort of different areas have we shown are similar? 3, how much do these similarities matter? So for instance, if we're saying that today I'm wearing a blue shirt, that's not a very important similarity if we're making an argument about my height. On the other hand, if we gathered many details about my ancestors and about my parents, my brother, things like that would tell us a lot about my height. The final thing to think about is a lack of dissimilarity. So sometimes we can come up with many similarities, but if they are being blocked by something very important that's in the opposite direction, this is going to kill it. So What we're looking for is premises that help. So we want a number of similarities, variety of them, relevance of similarities, and lack of dissimilarity. And then as long as we are modest with our conclusion, if we try for something too big, we will often fail to make a strong argument. But as long as we don't do that, we'll be in the clear. So let's think about it this way. So we have Junko likes baseball. Obiki Keiji likes baseball. Obiki Keiji plays on the Ham Fighters. Therefore, Junko also plays on the Ham Fighters. So this is going to be an argument where there's one thing that is similar, liking baseball. There's no variety. There's nothing else being offered here. That's not a very important thing. A lot of people like baseball. Don't know whether there's some dissimilarities. Maybe if Junko is a woman, that's kind of a dissimilarity. But this conclusion is not modest. So this is going to be a weak argument because few people actually play professional baseball. So this is not a common thing to actually be doing. So even liking baseball is not going to show much for that. Let's look at another one. James is a guy. Kazuya is a guy. James is short, therefore Kazuya is short. I'm going to say this is a very weak argument. The only similarity is they're both guys. There's no variety. It's an odd thing to say because normally the human male is taller than the human female. There's no known dissimilarity, but the conclusion is moderately modest. We're saying one thing about one person. All right, let's make it a little bit stronger. So I'm going to change it slightly here. So James is a Japanese guy, Kazuya is a Japanese guy. James is short, therefore Kazuya is short. Now we have two similarities, and one of them is about being a guy, and one of them is about being Japanese. So we're getting more relevance here. We have ethnicity, which often relates to height, and we have no known dissimilarities. So we still have our modest conclusion. This is getting stronger. So this is one I would say is strong. James is a Japanese guy. Kazuya is a Japanese guy. James and Kazuya are brothers. James is short, therefore Kazuya is short. Now we have three. We have that they are both guys, they are both brothers, they are Japanese. So that they're brothers is something that would tend to make it likely that their heights are similar. So this is a very strong argument by analogy. Let's look at another one. So Jiro really likes the woods and enjoys eating nuts, and his name starts with a J. Jiro is a flying squirrel. Junya really likes the woods and enjoys eating nuts, and his name starts with a J. Therefore, Junya is a flying squirrel. All right, what do we think? So I'm going to say this is weak. So we do have three similarities. They're different in kind. Liking the woods is something that's probably relevant for being a flying squirrel. Enjoying nuts is highly relevant for being a squirrel. Starting with J has no relevance. But the thing is, there could be lots of dissimilarities. There's many other animals that live in the forest or that like nuts. They're not all squirrels. They're not all flying squirrels. I'd say this is a medium modesty conclusion, is we could be even more modest. We could just say that he's a forest animal. That'd be more modest. So let's look and see what we can do to make it stronger. What if we switch to this? Jiro really likes the woods and enjoys eating nuts. Jiro is covered in fur and lives in a tree. Jiro is a flying squirrel. Junya likes the woods and enjoys eating nuts. Junya is covered in fur and lives in a tree. Therefore, Junya is a flying squirrel. So if we did this, we now have four similarities. We have the woods, the nuts, the fur, and living in a tree. So if we look at these similarities are much more relevant, and we've gotten rid of the irrelevant one of starting with a J. And this covers most of the things that would narrow down the animal it could be, so there's few other possibilities left. So like generalizations, which we'll look at next week, an argument by analogy can have all true premises and a false conclusion. So let's look at one. James lives in England, studies at a British university, and speaks English. James is British. Anna lives in England, studies at a British university, and speaks English. Therefore, Anna is British. So it turns out that she is not British. Turns out she is studying abroad. She's Japanese. This is basically an example from the past, but you get the idea. Is that this is something where everything was in place to make this a strong argument by analogy, but the conclusion happened to be false. So the most famous argument by analogy is a controversial one. The claim is that the world is like a watch. So the watch has many pieces that are finely made. They all have to work together. The world has many pieces that are very finely made, and they seem to all have to work together. A watch has a creator, therefore the world also has a creator. So this is called the watchmaker analogy. So let's look at this. I'm going to skip the strength question because I said this one's controversial. So it has two things that they work together. It's like a system and it's finely made. So this is a medium level of variety. These are two things that are not the same. We could also point out many dissimilarities. The world is much bigger than a watch. The world doesn't function as one single thing quite so tightly. And we could say the conclusions about the world are not very modest. So that's probably the biggest weakness of this argument by analogy. Thank you for your time and attention. I hope that you're enjoying this class. This week we have looked at arguments by analogy, which are a type of inductive argument. This means that they are not truth-preserving. The best form of them has a strong probability of having a true conclusion. The worst form has a low probability. For any of them, you could have a conclusion that is true, but not because of your argument. So there is that sort of coincidence. Or even with the best of arguments by analogy, your conclusion could still be false. So I do hope that you're learning. Please remember to ask questions.